Hello and welcome to Mangatora 96, and today we are going to talk about Otome game Sekai wa Mob ni Kibishi Sekai desu, or also known as the World of Otome Games is tough for mobs. While at first it may sound like your typical isekai, you will be right in this, as this series hasn't anything new and groundbreaking or an interesting gimmick, but what this series does have, and what separates this from the run-of-the-mill isekai, are the characters, specifically the main character Leon, whose moments when he rubs the truth into the pompous nobles' faces is on the same level of satisfaction as watching Luffy punch Charlos. He also isn't an overpowered protagonist, as the only thing that he has is his knowledge of the game that the world he reincarnated is based on. And he uses this knowledge pretty effectively, but at the same time this knowledge is a double-edged sword, as it hurts his personal relationships with others, as well as the world doesn't exactly follow the story from the game, which does cause him problems. Before going into the main topic of this video, that are the characters of Leon and the two heroines, in which I will go over their personalities and their relationships, here is a brief synopsis for those of you who aren't familiar with this story. Leon, a former Japanese worker, was reincarnated into an Otome game world, and despaired at how it was a world where females hold dominance over males. It was as if men were just livestock that served as stepping stones for females in this world. The only exception were the game's romantic targets, a group of handsome men led by the Crown Prince. In those bizarre circumstances, Leon held one weapon, his knowledge from his previous world, where his brazen sister had forced him to complete this game. Leon, who really just wants to live as a shut-in in the countryside, uses that knowledge to raise a ferocious revolt against the women and handsome man. Now before we start, here's the spoiler warning, as everything from here on will contain spoilers. So if you don't want to be spoiled, you can go read the manga, light novel or web novel. Or you could wait for an anime adaptation. At this point nothing has been announced, but I believe that this will get an anime at some point in the near future. Well, anyway, let's start with the main character of this story, Leon. Leon Fo Bartford, having died and been reincarnated into an Otome game he was playing before his death, he is the first hero of Holford Kingdom. As for his personality, Leon fully accepts his status as a mob character and tries to stay out of the main story of the game, although it doesn't work out that way. He is cynical and has a low view of the kingdom system that favors women. He has no patience for people that complain from a position of privilege or can't control their egos, and he enjoys crushing people like that, both physically and mentally. Despite looking down on the overly prideful people, Leon himself is arrogant in his abilities, because he thinks about how his actions affect others and doesn't waste any opportunity. Because of his mob status, he also believes how he doesn't always deserve the praise or affection he earns. This would make him originally try to push away or reject those rewards, including love of the ones he cares about. However, most of this backfires on him, resulting in him getting gradually distant from his dream of a peaceful life. After meeting his teacher, Leon gains a huge amount of respect for the gentlemanly behavior his professor has shown him. Leon tries to imitate him through his own tea parties and hope to reach his master's standard. However, at times where the girls in the academy treat his efforts as non-existent and trample all over his hard work in tea making, Leon sometimes doubts whether his path of the tea is misdirected or wrong. Despite how Leo initially comes off, he is actually far worse, so much so that even Luxion, who wants to commit genocide of the new humans, tells Leon how cruel he is when he is serious. Something that even both Julius and Marie took notice of. Because he saw Pierre as trash, he had no problem pinning a terrorist attack orchestrated by Luxion on him and was happy to take even his noble status away, mainly because Pierre marked himself as an enemy through his actions. Leon is also the type of person who will take revenge for insults directed to him or his loved ones. However, most of his cruel nature stemmed from the unfair circumstances he was always given before and after his reincarnation, and the efforts he had to go through to ensure his own survival, both mentally and physically. Overall, he simply wishes to live an easy life. He is somewhat intelligent, being able to figure out that Marie was also a reincarnated person within a short period of time, and try to come up with various plans to act as he pleases without getting himself in trouble. He has used this intelligence to also work various favors and plans towards those of higher status than him. He is able to understand the status of his situation and growing power, that he plans ways to avoid the trouble that comes with it. Those results usually end in his favor. He would often use those schemes as a means to live an easier lifestyle. However, he is not smart enough to realize how much of an influence he has towards others, and unintentionally brings himself further away on the simple life he originally desires. This side of him is also shown when it comes to romance, where he inadvertently doesn't realize the affection of various girls he earns throughout the series. When it comes to his preference on girls, he likes big boobs, which is something he does not try hard to hide. Aside from that, he is also shown to be a caring and kind individual, particularly towards those he feels bad for. Despite how he tries to stay out of trouble and not interfere with the story of the Otome world, he would often drag himself at the center of those events for someone's sake, although also seeing it as an opportunity to get back at those who wronged him. When it came down towards those he cares for, like Angelica and Olivia, he is even willing to risk his own life and always tries to think what's best for them. Another example is how he's also willing to take responsibility for his actions, such as looking after Olivia and sometimes the princess for interfering with aspects of the Otome story that should have been theirs. In spite of his rather dark personality, he also established a line of morals where he would never try to kill anyone unless it is absolutely necessary, like in the final clash between himself and the Principality of Phanos. Another example is when Lucian points out how such an option will give him the easy life he desires, but he always denies such a choice. Marie, his sister from Leon's previous life, points out that he should never be angered, and he will corner his adversaries slowly. A good example is shown in his previous life's childhood, where he is being bullied. It is assumed that he was able to inflict some kind of mental trauma towards the bullies, resulting in their school transfers few weeks later. Moving on to Angie, Angelica Raff Redgraves is the daughter of the Duke Redgraves and the former fiancée of Prince Julius Raff Holford. She is the first fiancée of Leon Fo Bartford. Angelica originally was supposed to be very hot-headed, which would be her eventual downfall, but because of Marie, we get to see more of who she is, feeling like a failure when Julius became infuriated with Marie, causing her to break the vase in her room and cry from her rejection from the prince. After the duel with the prince, she has shown to be far more kind and humble, going as far as working in the fields, but still has a fiery temper when a girl wants to get close to Leon. In the original Otome game, Angelica was the first antagonist. She grew jealous of Olivia's closeness to the princess and challenged her to a duel, with the prince and his group stepping up to represent Olivia, and no one representing Angelica. She lost the duel and was humiliated. Afterwards, she was forced to marry an older man and move to the countryside. As for her relationship with Leon, Angie gets along with Leon reasonably well, given that he was her knight in shining armor who represented her in her duel with the prince, knowing full well the consequences that were to come. After the duel, Angie was very grateful for what Leon had done for her, as she unmistakably realized how far he resolved himself to defeat the prince and his entourage, when she never properly thanked him, leading to Leon realizing that she was developing feelings for him. As the story progresses, Angie falls in love with Leon and gets engaged with him along with Olivia as a fellow bride. As a noblewoman engaged to a prince, she grew up expecting to be one of her husband's multiple wives, so she has no issue with Leon having multiple lovers. However, Angelica is against Leon being with a manipulative woman like Mari. As for her relationship with Olivia, originally Angie was never meant to get along with Olivia, as both were each other's foil, but thanks to Marie's intervention in the story and Leon introducing Olivia when Angie was in need for a friend, both of them got along excitingly well, enough for them to be considered best friends. Following the events after the duel with the Prince group, both Olivia and Angie spent a lot of time together, so much that from an outside perspective they may think that they were a couple. Their love for one another is great enough that the royal airship, Lucian and Leon believe it's a joke item, as its requirements were for the pilots of the ship to be truly in love, to deem them more than worthy enough to captain it. Their feeling for each other was great enough that she was more than happy to have Olivia as a fellow bride to Leon. Moving on to Olivia. Olivia is an honor student at the academy. She was the protagonist of the original Otome game and the second fiancée of Leon Foe Bartford. She is also the saint of the Holoford Kingdom in the Otome game. She is by all means a modest girl who is very kind and gentle with people. She dislikes gambling. As a commoner, she often shocked, if not stressed, on how most things around her are so expensive and luxurious. Despite her kindness and modesty, she lacks a consistent amount of self-confidence. This most likely stems from how she is a commoner who attends a school that is dominantly populated by nobles who mostly look down on her. Although she became more cheerful after befriending Leon and Angelica, her self-confidence deteriorated even further when she feels too dependent on them and questions her own self-worth. It wasn't until an attack from the Principality of Phanos that she eventually became more confident in herself from the desire to protect her friends, which has awakened some of her powers as a saint. This newfound strength grew where she now became more forward and honest with her feelings. This is mostly expressed through her interactions with Leon and Angelica. Olivia demonstrated a fair amount of patience where she was willing to wait for Leon's answer after she confessed to him, and originally having no doubt that Leon would not cheat on her or Angelica after they become engaged. However, she also will become very forward, if not pushy, when she feels otherwise. In her debut in the other Commonwealth, her jealousy is hideous and extremely dangerous, hiding her anger with a terrifying smile. In Marie's route, without the influence of Leon and Marie, Olivia kept to herself, studying alone, having the stress of being the only commoner in a school full of nobles, especially when the prince's entourage kept disturbing her peaceful time. Olivia was originally served as the protagonist of the original game. In the game, without Marie and Leon's interference, she entered the academy on a scholarship and somehow obtained Kyles as her servant. She would eventually gain the affection of Julius, Gilk, Greg, Bride and Chris. When a war broke out, she was discovered to be a saint and her powers were instrumental in stopping the war. Afterwards, she would live happily with her 5 lovers in a reverse harem ending. As for her relationship with Leon, she meets Leon when he found her on the floor after some noble girls pushed her down and left. After being invited into Leon's private tea ceremony, she felt better. Leon also, with assistance from Jen, helped her know the Academy's costumes. While aware of the dark aspects of Leon's personality, she is also able to see through that and knows that he is a kind individual. As the story continues on, she unwittingly falls in love with Leon. As an example of this closeness is how Olivia wants him to call her Livia. However, when various nobles point out how dependent she was towards Leon and Angelica, she begins to worry about her position and self-worth. When she was rescued by Leon after being used by Carla, This stressed her to the point she accidentally snapped at Leon how worthless she is and wonders why Leon keeps on helping her despite how more incompetent she is compared to him. She immediately regrets this as their relationships became estranged as a result. They managed to make up during the school trip, and when she was saved by him from an attack by the Principality of Anes, her feelings grew to the point where she confessed to him and vows to make him look at her. This comes to fruition when she, along with Angelica, become engaged to Leon. She now does whatever she can to be more useful towards him and become jealous whenever he intermingles with any other girls, putting on an eerie smile whenever Leon is seemingly getting too close to another girl. As for her relationship with Angie, in the game's original story, Angelica and Olivia were never meant to get along, but due to Mari's interference in the story, the protagonist and villainess became unexpectedly best friends, leading the two to become very close with one another, as after that match with the prince and his group, she was left heartbroken and alone, leaving only Leon and her the only people she can trust. As the story progresses, her and Angelica grow to the point where they even sleep in the same bed together with only their underwear. In the climax during the war event, their feelings for each other was considered true love by Weiss, leaving many surprised for their Yuri development. With this, I covered everything that I wanted to cover about Leon, Angie and Olivia. And that will be all for this video. If you like this video, leave a like, leave your thoughts in the comments below, or subscribe to the channel for more manga reviews and One Piece content. And until next time, take care.